Hi, everyone. Welcome to Azure User Group Sweden, our session for this Saturday. I hope that you're having a great weekend or Saturday today, wherever you are. And today is a special session because we're going to learn a lot about Azure Arc from our special guest speaker. And today, I'm missing Håkan because he's traveling right now at Build Stuff conference, but I'm here to assist you. And before we bring our guest to the stage, I want to show our code of conduct. So we just want to remind everyone to be nice and friendly, to listen with purpose and be thoughtful. Be respectful to others, be curious, and open to share your ideas with others. Be inclusive with your comments and questions. And if you want to learn more about our code of conduct, feel free to visit the link on this slide and join us on our meetup group. And without further ado, let me just bring our guests, Karel and Wim, on the stage.
Hi.
Hello. Hi, Jona.
Yeah. Hi, Karel and Wim. Did I pronounce it well?
Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Quite good in English, to be honest, because it's quite difficult to pronounce my even little small name. But yeah, it seems to be difficult for English-speaking people. But it's quite good.
Yeah, thank you. In Sweden, they call me Jona. So they pronounce the J as Y, but actually it's called Jonah, the English version.
That's like I would say it, to be honest.
Yes, yeah. Can you tell us more about where you're sitting right now, what you do, and then what you're going to talk about today before we bring
maybe
it to
Karel,
stage?
you can start if you want.
Yeah, we are both MVPs from Belgium, and in this week we just had a running joke that we never been in Seattle before because of the COVID situation. So we are hoping one day that we that we land in Seattle and meet each other, all the MVPs in general. But we are indeed both from Belgium. And yeah, we are working in different companies, but mostly focusing on Azure technology and helping customers to leverage their on-prem data centers and move that to the cloud. So that's also something that we are going to talk about today.
Yeah. So we were both also MCTs, so we also deliver Azure trainings and workshops for our companies, or just around.
Yes.
And then I think we all have our own blogs and stuff like that, and we write a lot, and we speak with each other quite a lot, I think, also in public.
Yes.
Even if we're working for different companies, and even we also have our own user groups in Belgium, different ones, but we have a lot of contact.
Yes.
Also with the other community people in Belgium, but it will be the same in Sweden, I think. So
yes, it's really great to connect with other MVPs from Belgium, and I know that we've been in many conferences. You can see we both have the the trophy of the Cloud Summit. Yes, and we have actually guests saying hi to us here. We have a message from Gabriel. Hi, everyone. Good Saturday to all. He is also one of the consistent audience in Azure User Group Sweden, who recently cleared Azure Fundamentals. So congratulations, Gabriel. And we also have a hello from Ashes. He is also a consistent audience, and also Ernest King Arthur from Microsoft User Group Ghana. So I've been also in their session. So we have people from
that's
Norway.
Far away.
Yes, we have from Norway, from Ghana, and from different parts of the world. All right, so let me just bring both of you to the stage. So do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, let me see if I can share my screen. Let me open it, share screen. My second one, normally my Azure portal should be showing quite directly.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, it's blurring. Right. It's blurring, or
it's blinking flipping like Christmas
lights. Let me try it again. Maybe it's better now.
It's not yet Christmas time, Wim.
No, it's quite early.
It's quite early.
Probably a lot of people are already counting the days till Christmas. That's the season. Seemed a little bit better.
Yeah.
Let me also
yes.
share my slides. It should be showing, I think.
Yeah, it's showing.
There it is.
Thank you so much. So varsågod, we say it in Sweden. So
thank you. So hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining, and we hope you already enjoyed your Saturday morning. Our session is titled "The Insider's Guide to Azure Arc." And Karel and myself think with the title, the topic will be rather clear. And we really hope that by the end of our session, we can convince everyone who's not using Arc to start using it. Before we start, we also want to thank Hakan and Jona and all others involved with the Azure User Group Sweden for setting up this meetup and, of course, for allowing us to deliver this talk. So on the agenda today, we'll first tell you a short story about an on-premises data center and in its modern evolution. And we look into how Azure Arc fits into the story. Then we will look into, first of all, Azure Arc-enabled servers, Arc-enabled SQL Server. Also, Karel looks into Arc-enabled Kubernetes and Arc-enabled data service. And of course, we will show some demos in between. We will also look into the pricing because, at the end of the month, someone still needs to pay the Azure bill. And before closing off, we will tell you something about the latest Arc announcement, most of them from Ignite, which was not that long ago. And completely on the end or in between, we hope that we still will have some time for a Q&A where we would love to answer any of your questions. We also already shortly introduced ourselves, but let us do it once again. So my name is Matthyssen, and just like Karel, I live in Belgium, where I work as an Azure technical advisor. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer and awarded as a Microsoft Azure MVP, which was and still is a huge honor. Community-wise, I'm a founding board member of a Belgian user group called MCTMC, where we mainly focus on Azure and Microsoft 365, but we also keep an eye on security, Hyper-V, and even the complete Windows Server landscape. Next to that, I also have my own blog, https://matthyssen.com. And like most IT professionals these days, I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out, just want to say hi or ask a question about Arc, you can always contact me through my Twitter handle @Matthyssen or LinkedIn, or you can simply scan the QR code at the bottom of the slide. So Karel, I think, you can introduce yourself now, I think.
Yeah. So we're introduced already. So my name is Karel de Winter. I work as a cloud solution architect at Dexmark. That's another Belgium company. And I'm a member of the Tech9 user group. So next to Wim's user group, there are a lot of different user groups in Belgium. So we have both a different user group. Mine user group is more focusing on Azure and IT Pro related stuff. Also a Microsoft certified trainer and a Microsoft Azure MVP. And if you want to reach out to me, the best way is via Twitter or LinkedIn. You can connect with me. And if you directly want to see my LinkedIn page, just like Wim said, scan the QR code. So as you may know or not, Wim and I are having a background of IT system engineers. So mainly we went from infrastructure engineers to more a cloud-focused job, but still in the days, and maybe some of you will remember that, the moment that you are entering a data center, you see all the blinking LEDs because you need to replace some hardware, you need to add some storage, or you need to add or switch a cable in some firewall or switching. And those moments, those things are still in the back of our minds. We remember that. And it's a moment that is still happening today, in the sense of a lot of companies still have a data center on-premises environments, the edge, the things where Microsoft are talking about. And those things need to be managed also. And that's what we are going to talk about today.
So, like I already said, and what we see these days is that customers often have 10 to hundreds and even thousands of applications running in their IT environments. which are all running on diverse infrastructure. And these days, even some companies are already running applications and workloads in multi-cloud scenarios. And a lot of those companies these days then come into a situation like you can see now on the screen, where they're running application and workloads in their own data centers, in their branch offices, or in hosting environments. And like just said, some of them already run in a multi-cloud scenario where they're using 2 or more clouds like Azure, AWS, or even Google Cloud. And to add to this complexity, their IT, or they're called cloud administrators these days, also use different development tools, different languages, and even different frameworks. And they mix up technologies like DevOps, like Kubernetes, and AI. So their environment and their applications and requirements are evolving and growing almost each day. And most of them then not only end up with a lot of questions, but in a way they also struggle with how they can manage, how they can govern, control, and secure their IT resources. And this in a seamless way, because there are so many places and different resources they need to look into. And most of them simply require one central place to manage their complete hybrid environment, like we call it these days. And to even make that even more complex, at the same time, a lot of those companies also want to unlock new business scenarios by bringing cloud innovations to their already existing on-premise infrastructure. So at the same time, they want to modernize their local data centers with new cloud infrastructures like AI or like edge computing. And in a way, that's where Azure Arc comes into the picture.
Yeah, that's what we say always, that Azure Arc is in that sense the bridge between your on-premises data center and your cloud environment. In our case, we were the most with the Microsoft Azure platform, but Azure Arc will also enable you to project your on-premises resources into a cloud like Azure or AWS or Google Cloud or so on. So it's the gap between what we know as the on-prem data center and your cloud environment. And if we look at the benefits of Azure Arc, so why should you use Azure Arc? What we see a lot is that it can help customers to organize and also govern their on-premises services, but also the Kubernetes clusters and so on. So they can govern their Azure services. So in the way that they govern their Azure services, they can also govern it and manage it in an on-prem situation. And it's also to have that visibility. So you have one management control plane into all your operations, not only specific cloud operations, but also your on-prem operations. And a lot of companies also need to deal with regulatory compliancy rules that they need to have the data in a specific country where the manufacturing plant is, for example. And in that case, they can't move to cloud or they can't use multi-cloud environments. And that's also where Azure Arc will help those customers, because the data stays in the company, stays in the location where it needs to be. And if they, for example, have a very low latency needed application, they can still host workloads on-prem and have that connection to Azure to manage that. We see it also a lot to not only modernize the applications, but also modernize the data center, so you can have a more management capabilities than you just use on-prem. So you can use the whole Azure environment to manage your on-prem situations. We see also a lot of business continuity scenarios where they use Azure Site Recovery to have a complete disaster recovery scenario for their on-prem data centers. And the freedom of any public cloud, in that sense that there is no vendor lock-in. With Azure Arc, you can say we can target multiple clouds, so you don't have one cloud vendor that you've been locked in. So with Azure Arc, all those benefits are enabling your on-prem situation.
So, and as you can see on the screen right now, mostly Azure admins, Azure DevOps engineers, and even Azure support engineers all connect to Azure using different tools, such as the Azure Portal, Azure CLI, or Azure PowerShell. And what happens behind the scenes is that all those tools interact with the Azure control plane, which is essentially Azure Resource Manager, or ARM, like we say. And the thing what Azure Arc does is that it extends this control plane to resources outside of Azure, so that it allows you to manage your entire environment by simply projecting your existing non-Azure on-premises or even other cloud resources into Azure Resource Manager. And in that way, you can manage virtual machines, Kubernetes clusters, like Karel said, and databases if they were running in Azure. And if you then look a little bit deeper, you can split up Azure Arc into Azure Arc enabled infrastructure at one side, which enables you to connect to any of your resources which live outside of Azure, and in a way allows you to work with them as if they were Azure native resources, using the same management tools and services that Azure provides. And on the other hand, you have Azure Arc enabled services, which give you the flexibility to deploy fully managed Azure services almost anywhere, which can be on-prem or even in AWS or Google Cloud. So, and when you configure Azure Arc, it allows you not only to apply management through, for example, Azure VM extensions, but also to apply monitoring, governance, and security to any of your non-Azure resources. And with the use of Azure Monitor, Azure Policy, and Microsoft Defender for Cloud, it even allows you to manage and govern all other things. You also have the possibility to manage your Kubernetes at scale and run even Azure data service on top of your Kubernetes clusters. And to know just know that there are also a lot of more options and possibilities which are almost growing every day, because Microsoft, I think, Karel, we say it every time, is really focusing on Arc these days. Yeah. So they're bringing in new extra features, new resources, new capabilities almost weekly these days. So they're really focusing on it. So try to follow it, we would say.
Yeah, we already have one question, Wim, from Ashish, who's asking, is Azure Arc some agent running on an on-prem VM? And we will definitely talk about that. So yes, it is some kind of agent, but we will explain and show you how it works.
And I can even show it in my demo. So I can really show you which one and how you can use it even from your on-premises server. So in a way, Azure Arc, like we just said, is extending the Azure control plane to your existing infrastructure. But a thing we didn't yet mention is what kind of infrastructure service you can enable with Azure Arc. Well, these days, with the general availability of Azure Arc enabled servers, Microsoft supports Windows Server from early Windows Server 2008 R2 SP1. Probably some people are still using those. Hopefully not a lot, but we even see some customers still using Windows Server 2003. So 2008, probably there will be some people using them, and completely up to Windows Server 2022. It also supports a wide range of Linux operating systems, such as Ubuntu, SUSE, Red Hat, and even Amazon Linux. Just like this week, Karel, until now, I didn't see anybody using Amazon Linux, but maybe we have some luck today. Yeah. And then, Karel, I think you can also tell us a little bit more about the two other options.
Yeah, so for the two other options in the Azure Arc enabled infrastructure, so next to your on-prem servers with the OSs that Wim talked about, you also can enable Arc on your SQL server. So that means that you have a VM which has SQL Server installed. There you can also install specific agents and extensions that will project your SQL Server into your Azure portal. And in that way, you can manage it the same way as you do in your Azure environment. And you also can have some benefits like the environment health that you can send to your Azure environment and look at that. And then we also can enable the Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes. In that way, you can have and the same management capabilities as you deploy, for example, your application, or you are doing your configuration to your Kubernetes clusters, or for example your AKS environment in a cloud environment. you can do that in the same way to your on-premises Kubernetes clusters. So for example, AKS on Azure Stack HCI is a very hot topic nowadays, because it's very convenient to have an Azure Stack HCI on-prem cluster, so that's your hardware, and enable AKS, so the Azure Kubernetes service, on top of that. So it's complete managed by you, but you can also project that in your Azure environment, so you have the same GitOps approach, for example, to deploy your application, to deploy your configuration to your clusters. And you can also use Red Hat OpenShift, VMware Tanzu, and the others that are here on the slide. So this is basically Azure Arc enabled infrastructure.
So if you then take a closer look at Azure Arc enabled server and Arc enabled SQL server, well, like I already said, these days you can onboard a wide variety of servers to Azure with Azure Arc, which can be running on premises, on Hyper-V, on VMware, on Azure Stack ACI, and even at the edge or in another cloud environment. And with Arc enabled, you can then organize all these servers, apply governance, security, and even role-based access control of them. So you can use Azure Policy, Azure Monitor, and Azure Resource Stack. And for example, you can use Azure Update Management to keep your servers up to date with the latest patches. And you can also deploy any kind of Azure VM extensions, which in a way will simplify the management of your hybrid machines. And even to uplift your security posture, you can use Microsoft Defender for Cloud in combination with Microsoft Sentinel. Microsoft Defender for Cloud, by the way, is the new name for the combo of Azure Security Center and Azure Defender. And if you, for example, are a service provider and you manage a lot of customers with different Azure environments, you can even do cross-tenancy management with the use of Azure Lighthouse.
Yeah, we have another question.
Yes. You're very active, Karel. You can be my co-host.
It's quite easy.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're assisting. That's really great. Very interactive. Yeah, we have a question that came in. We have a question from Gabriel. With Azure Arc, is local on-prem access for administrator replaced by role-based access control in Azure? Will this be recommended way?
It's a combination. If you implement a role-based access control, you can access the control plane and can manage your VMs from there, but you can't manage the VM inside it. So if you still need to do some things inside the VM, you still need to have some local administrator or a domain administrator rights to do the stuff inside, but everything around it, all the features and all the management services you put on top of it, like you're using your EAS VMs, you enable update management and all those things, you can control by using role-based access control, just like you did before for any other Azure resource or resource group or whatever. Yes. So, but if you need to do some things inside the VM, still at the OS level, or you need to install an application, you can automate it through custom script extension, for example. You can do it in that. But if you still need to do some things inside the VM, you still need to have some local administrator rights to do those things. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Gabriel, for your question. I hope it answers.
It's a really good question, to be honest.
Yes, it is a good one.
It's a good one, yeah.
Because
some people try to think they can do everything from Azure then, but yeah, sometimes even if you manage your EAS VMs, you use Azure Bastion, for example, to do some things inside the VM on the OS level, for example. That's not capable to do it from the shell around it. Yeah.
Yes, we got thanks for the answer. All right. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And another good question, and something a lot of people seem to ask is, it's fine, Azure Arc is there, but how do we get started with enabling our service into Arc? Well, of course, first of all, you need an Azure subscription, and to be able to install the Azure Connected Machine Agent, that's the agent that's needed inside the VM to contact your Azure Arc. You should have administrator permissions on the server you want to add. Because Azure Arc enabled servers, next to that, it also depends on two resource provided in order to use the service. So, which are the Microsoft Hybrid Compute and the Microsoft Guest Configuration. So if you're using a new subscription, when you're starting with the new subscriptions, those will probably not be enabled by default. So you first of all need to register those two inside your subscription, and then you simply, if you do it through the Azure portal, whenever you do it for the first time, you will probably using the Azure portal to do it and to test it out. So you just log into your Azure portal, go to the Arc plate. I will show you also in the demo, and then you simply generate, download, and the general installation script. Then you go to your server, open PowerShell as an administrator, and you run that specific script. And that script will install an agent and will configure the connection from that agent to Azure Arc. So like you can see, you have those for Windows servers, but you also have those for Linux servers. So the commands and the script are in there. There are also a lot of good documentation on the Microsoft Docs if you want to get started. And Karel will tell you something even better later on, I think. And when that agent is configured, you then start verifying the connection, just like you do whenever you configure something else. Normally, by default, the connected machine agent communicates outbound securely over port HTTP 443, TCP port 443. But if you're using a proxy server, for example, or any other kind of firewall, you can even configure it to work in that way. And then, if everything is up and running, you can start applying those other services and resources on top of it. Like I said, the portal is one option to deploy it. Of course, these days you can also use Azure CLI, and you can even use Windows Admin Center to install and configure everything that's required. But we will show you some things in the demo. Good to know, and something we also really want to mention is that you can also use Azure Private Link to securely connect to your networks to Azure Arc. Just keep in mind that's in preview, that is still in preview, and therefore, you shouldn't use it on your production workloads. So for people who don't know what Private Link is, with Azure Private Link, you can securely link Azure PaaS services to your virtual network using private endpoints. And in a way, by combining Private Link with Azure Arc, it means you can connect your Azure Arc enabled servers and all the traffic they're generated over your Azure Express route or site-to-site VPN connection, instead of using the public internet, for example, over port 443, or even despite your proxy server, for example. So it's a more secure way to connect everything. So then everything is more private than just over the public internet, the communications. Because that's a question we also get a lot, I think, Karel. How can we even better protect all that communication? Because we don't want to see it going over port 443 directly over the internet. We want to keep it controlled or secured. That's the way you do it.
Yes. Hi, I'm back. Yes, we have a question from Ashish. Yes.
Yeah, the question is, does it mean the Azure Arc agent that is on-prem needs to have connection to the internet? Yes, only outbound connection, and you can configure that agent to use a specific proxy server also, if that's enabled on your network.
Or this private link. That's
you can
the way to do it, but it's still in preview. So, but the default one is the 443 over the internet. So if it's through a proxy server, it doesn't matter. Normally, it should work for almost everybody, I think.
Yes, thank you. Hope it answers your question.
And then on top of Azure Arc enabled servers, we also have Azure Arc enabled SQL Server. And to enable this, you just register a running SQL Server instance with Azure Arc using the Azure portal, using the registration script, just like you would register any of your other Azure Arc enabled servers. And then you do an extra thing, which then will install the SQL Arc extension to the connected machine agent. And this will allow you to manage your SQL Server instances running on your Azure Arc enabled services from Azure, and do some specific things. Like you can see, some solutions you can enable, like Microsoft Defender for Cloud or the SQL Server Assessment. It allows you to, like you can see, a SQL environment health check using the on-demand SQL assessment feature. But yeah, for example, you need to have the Microsoft Monitoring Agent installed for this, but I will show it in the demo, which will be here. That will be rather more clear for everybody, I think. So enough said. Let me open my Azure portal. There it is. First, I want to show you something else. And Karel is always jealous about that one. I have some Nuke server. It's deployed in my garage, so it's downstairs. I'm at the second floor at the moment. It's an Hyper-V. I will show you. It's a 2022. If you go this one, you see it. It's a Windows Server 2022. It's running Hyper-V on top of it. And I'm also running some VMs. So I have my domain controller, I have some specific gateway server, I have some application services running, and I even have 2 SQL services running. And the thing I did is that for some of those services, I already connected them through Azure Arc. So if I open up my Azure portal once again, and I simply go to the Arc blade, you can use the global search bar at top. Just type in Arc, click on the Azure Arc, then you come in the Azure Arc window. You see there are a lot of stuff in there. If I, for example, click on the All Azure Arc Resources tab, you can see I already have my Apo1, my Apo2, and my SQL Server. And on top of that, SQL Server enabled also running inside. Then if I go to Infrastructure, for example, and I click on this one, on the servers one, you see my 3 servers, which are 2 of them are Windows VMs, and 1 of them is Linux. And you can even see that they're running in Belgium, in Antwerp, in my garage. So if I open up one of those, they're already connected. I will also show you how you can connect them. But let me first show this. So probably this kind of picture will look quite familiar to a lot of people. It's almost the same thing whenever you open in the ASVM through the Azure portal. All those things, the look will be quite familiar. You can see I have some tags on it. Just for example, this tag is specifically for Azure Arc enabled servers. So it's saying my data center is located in Antwerp. But the other tags I also use for any other resources inside my Azure environment. So in that way, it's completely the same if I'm using Azure Arc enabled server or using EAS VMs or whenever other resource in Azure. You can see my operating system. It's a Windows Server 2022. You can see the fully qualified domain name. You can see which agent is installed on it, and you can see that it's a Windows VM, for example. But the cooler thing is the RBAC rules. You can just use those RBAC rules just like you used to be using them for any other resource group you put them on or whatever resource you put them on. There's some Arc-specific roles in there, so you can also use them there. You can see I can apply some tags, I can apply extra tags, just like you used to before. But the nicer thing is I can install extensions because the Azure Connected Machine agent is installed inside my VM. I will show you directly. I can also install some extra extensions on top of it, like the Microsoft Monitoring Agent, like the Dependency Agents, and so on and so on. The nice thing is you can manage everything from Azure. That's why you need that specific RBAC rules to do those things. For example, it also sees I'm missing or one of my agents is not updated. You can simply click on it and update it directly from here. It's quite easy, just like you used to with your other resources. Then under the security thing, because Microsoft Defender for Cloud is enabled for this one, it will also give you some security recommendations. You can see my Microsoft Defender for Servers is on that specific subscription. You need to enable that one, otherwise it doesn't work. But you see, it's just giving the same recommendations like you used to be seeing from your other resources. It will give it for that specific VM. It also puts in the severity, so medium, low, whatever, it's all there. Just like you used to with your other resources, you can also apply Azure policies. just the way there's, I think, Karel, a policy we also apply mostly is that if specific agents are not installed on those specific VMs, like the new Azure monitoring agent, whenever a new Azure Arc enabled server is onboarded in the environment, that specific agent is automatically deployed through Azure policy, for example. Or that Microsoft Cloud for Defender is configured automatically, so you don't need to take any steps for them anymore. Also, the Azure Security Benchmark, if you enable it, it's version 3, I think now. It was announced that
yeah, correct.
Ignite, Karel? Yeah. So that one, if it's in that specific resource group, under that specific subscription, under a management group, and you enable it on the subscription level, it will also apply those security benchmark and give you some recommendations related to security in this way. But one of the nicest things, in my opinion, is the update management, for example. So maybe some of you are already using Azure Automation, and they enabled update management for their EAS Windows VMs and for their EAS Linux VMs. The nice thing is you can use the same schedule schedule deployments for your which you're using for your EAS VMs for your on-premises VMs. So I created a simple schedule. The schedule is applied to my EAS VMs, but in the same time, it's also directly configured to use for any of my Azure Arc enabled servers. So you can configure it just like you used to be before, and you can start using and updating all your VMs from all your onboarded on-premises VMs from here. So at the moment, you can see I'm using 2 security updates, but yeah, it's in the schedule. So probably later on today, it will be deployed. Other nice things. Also, through Azure Automation, you can use inventory and change tracking. With the inventory, you can list up all software that's deployed on the Azure Arc enabled server. So I don't need to log on anymore on that server specifically. I can see which software is installed from over here. Like you can see the Azure Connected Machine agent is deployed and the dependency agent and so on and so on. And another one is the change tracking. With the change tracking, you can start following up software that's changed, legacy keys that are changed. You can all do it directly from the Azure portal now. You don't need to run any tools or look into your HC on the onboarded VM. You can also look at all those changes. Maybe the server is crashed because somebody installed a new piece of software. You can all find it directly from over here whenever you extra enabled it on top of your Arc enabled VM. Also, the insights, probably a lot of people also using that one if you're using EAS VMs. So a nice feature is the dependency mapping, which in a way gives me an overview of which ports are being used by that specific VM and which servers are connected to that specific port. So you can all look from, I hope the screen is big enough. You can all look and check it from over here. You can also look into your log events. You can look into your alerts and connections and so on and so on. And you simply do it by enabling inside Azure Monitor VM insights for that specific Arc-enabled VM. So a lot of possibilities and a lot of things you can do for your on-premise VMs, which are in a way the same like you manage your EAS VMs. And for example, if we look into a specific VM, let me take my app 1. Let me first type in my super secret password. I still need to make that a lot shorter, I think, Karel, because I always type it wrong. For some specific reason, I'm way too secure in my on-prem environment, I think. So I'm logged on to my on-premise app 1 VM. And for example, if I go to let me look into this one. It's there. I could let me type it just in. So if I look into my installed programs and feature, you can see the Azure Connected Machine agent is installed. That's the agent that communicates with Azure Arc, and whenever you run that specific script, that's the agent that gets deployed. Then I also have the dependency agent that's installed through that specific extension. And I have the Microsoft monitoring agent, which gives me the Azure monitoring capabilities for this specific VM. All those things, whenever you run the script, are deployed in the program files folder. You have an extra Azure Connected Machine agent folder, and there are a lot of resources in there. For example, people were still used to working with the command prompt. You can also interact with Azure Connected Machine Agent from there. So you simply go to that specific folder. Let me see if I can do it. It's Azure Connected. And if I go there, and if you then type in this one, and for example, type in show, it will give you some information. Oh, it's typing. What is doing? It's like this. Yeah, I didn't. I typed something wrong, I think. Okay, typo. It should work. Yeah, there it is. So in this command, for example, will give you a lot of information about the Azure Connected Machine Agent. It will give you the subscription it's connected to, the tenant. It will give you a VM ID. The VM ID in the back, it will also create a managed identity for that specific VM. And you can also communicate with that identity to, for example, a key vault or whatever. You can see the agent version. The log is over there. You can see its status. It's connected. It's a Microsoft corporation, and all my extensions are running, for example. And this way, you can also interact in another way with that agent. But Karel, I think that was enough about Azure Arc enabled servers. Let us also look into Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes. So
yeah, so briefly touching the Kubernetes part here. So what we see is that Kubernetes is growing immensely. And not only because of the open source community that's around it, but also we see the wide adoption of containerized applications. And Kubernetes with Azure Arc integration, that's a key for it's a key differentiator for Microsoft. Why? Because of other cloud models or other cloud vendors don't have that in their portfolio. So with Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes, you can ensure that your application is portable, so you can target a cloud Kubernetes cluster, but also on-prem. And you can manage that in the same way as you do for your cloud environment. The Kubernetes environment that you can use as any CNCF certified. So if you have a CNCF certified Kubernetes cluster, then you are good to go and you can onboard that into Azure Arc. So you can project, like I say, your Kubernetes clusters in your Azure portal, and you can manage it the same way as you do. But a big benefit is that you also can use the GitOps approach that you are using, for example, in your cloud environment, to target configurations or applications that are declared or stored in your Git repo, and then push that to your on-prem clusters. So the moment when you enable that Kubernetes cluster, you can do all that. So you can also deploy your application at scale and manage and update that at scale as you will. So everything will be source controlled, and you can use the same developer tools as you use now in your application. So on the next slide, we see an example of how that will look into your Azure environment. So you have, I will show that in the demo, but you basically see your Kubernetes cluster in the same way like Wim showed you with the VMs. And you can also see if you have GitOps enabled or not, what your configuration or application is, and you can see some insights also. And on the next slide, so the second one is more detailed about the Git configuration. But on the next slide, we will see that we have some benefits or some things that we can do with the Arc-enabled Kubernetes. So we can connect from multiple flavors of ways to connect to Kubernetes cluster. You can use the same ecosystem as you use today. You can configure it in the workflow that you have right now. You can, like Wim said, also govern and secure, but also monitor it with the insights, as we know that integration with Azure Monitor is also in place. And you can have not only your cluster observability, but also your application. And any infrastructure can be used, any Kubernetes cluster can be used. Next to the Arc-enabled infrastructure, you have the Kubernetes, and the third flavor of Azure Arc, or the third thing that you can do with Azure Arc, is the Azure Arc-enabled data services. And in general, that means that you can run, for example, an Azure SQL managed instance, or for example, an Azure database for Postgres hyperscale. So you can take what you know right now in your Azure environment as a fully managed SQL environment managed by Microsoft then. So you have always the latest version. You can also use that in your on-premises environment. So you have a complete SQL environment that has always the latest updates, that is managed by you, but getting the updates from the Microsoft platform. So you can have those in your data center on-prem, but also in the edge or in third-party clouds. And that's the power of Azure Arc, that not only it's targeting on-prem data centers, but also multi-cloud environments. So it's you can fully automate the deployment also. Like Wim said, you can use Azure policies to target your SQL database, and you can have always the latest version. So in that way, you don't have end of support because you're always on the latest version. And very important also, you have that dynamically scale experience, because the data services are sitting on top of a Kubernetes cluster, so it can be scaled when your workload needs that. And that's something that we will see on the next slide. Is that the scaling is not not the only most important part, but also you have the industry leading security and governance capabilities from Microsoft, and you have the modern billing also. But if you look at the architecture here, so you have any infrastructure, any hardware that you can use. On top of that, you run any Kubernetes cluster that is CNCF certified, for example, AKS on HCI, but also OpenShift and the EKS or GKA variants in AWS or Google Cloud. You can use that, of course. And on top of that, it will have what they call an Azure Arc data controller, and it's the data controller that's responsible for communicating with the underlying hardware, so your Kubernetes cluster, and with the Azure environment. And next to that data controller, it will also deploy different other workloads on your Kubernetes cluster, for example, a SQL managed instance. So you can have multiple instances of that managed instance. And in the future, they will also have some analytics systems that will be available on your on-prem environment. And then on the next slide, we will see that a little decide decision tree here. So what if you want to run your SQL workloads in Azure? Well, then we know the managed instance there already exists, but also if you only need a single database, you can just run or host your databases in that way. And you also have the availability of using Elastic Pool. So if you need to have more databases, then you go with that. But if your data needs to be on-prem and stay inside of your company, inside of your country, then, for example, you can use Azure Arc enabled SQL managed instance that's hosted on your Kubernetes cluster, and from there create databases and use all the nice capabilities that you have, always the latest version, but staying in your on-prem data center. And then the next screen will just show us the management capabilities. What do you get if you host your SQL Server on your own, like Wim did? Just a plain VM with SQL Server in. You have your security features in place, but you don't have that elastic scale. You don't have that HADR recovery possibilities. You don't have the auto upgrade and so on. If you have that Azure Arc enabled database, that will be enabled for you just by connecting your SQL database. So you can use the security features like Wim said. But if you're going for an Azure PaaS database, so for example the Elastic Pool or the single database, you will see that there are not that much differences anymore between your plain good old SQL Server and an Arc enabled database that you can have. Yeah, that's a very important topic here. So what we use a lot is the Azure Arc Jumpstart for providing, for example, demos. So the Azure Arc Jumpstart is the go-to website if you need to know something about the Azure Arc in general. So of course, the docs are very important, but Azure Arc Jumpstart is a project on its own where specific Microsoft people are responsible for, and they put in a lot of effort in it. They are creating scripts, they are creating templates that you can use, for example, scripts to onboard multiple servers, to create the data services, to have your Kubernetes onboarded into your Azure environment. All those things that, for example, we use in our demo environment are on the Azure Arc Jumpstart. And we use it for demo, but we also use it in production environments. And we have even contributed to the Azure Arc Jumpstart because we had some customer scenarios that were very interesting to show it to the Azure Arc Jumpstart team, and they just onboarded it in their own portfolio. And with that, Wim, I think I can share my screen now, and I can quickly go. Let me share my second screen and see if that's working. Voila. So the same thing here. I went to the Azure Arc portal in the same way as Wim showed you. Wim showed you the servers and SQL servers, but in my case, we have 2 enabled Kubernetes clusters. So I have, for example, that one here. So if you are familiar with the Azure Kubernetes service, so the managed Kubernetes server in general, you will see the same thing. So you can see the namespace from a Kubernetes cluster that is hosted on-prem. You will see the different namespaces here, but you also can see the workloads that are very important. So you have your deployments, your active pods, replica sets, and so on. So you can manage all that. And if there's something wrong, you can see, okay, I have to check that, and they are not in a ready state anymore. So basically, you can see it via the portal. Very important, like I said, you can use the same GitOps approach. So I have a cluster configuration that is stored in a GitHub repo on my own GitHub account that is just deploying an application and also some kind of configuration deployed to the cluster. So you will see that is deployed on the cluster via the Kubernetes environment. You can use the policies like Wim said, and very important is that insights capability. So you can have a look at Azure Monitor capabilities, not only from your Kubernetes clusters in your cloud environment, but also on-prem. So you see your cluster CPU utilization, memory, but also the node count and the pods if there are any running, and what is the total account of running. You can see information about your nodes, the CPU, and so it's very convenient to just onboard your Kubernetes cluster and see what you can do there in case if you want to have all that capabilities and see it in your in your Azure portal environment. If you have a look then in my on-prem environment, so I don't have any hardware running in my basement like Wim has. I'm not that rich, so I just created a VM. In fact, it's the Azure Jumpstart Arc box, so you can deploy that to test out all things from Azure Arc, what it has to offer you. So if you look at the namespaces, you will see that I have my cluster configuration, but also the configuration agent, and I have my different namespaces. But very important, I have some simple application, the Azure Vote with the front end. You will see that it has been deployed to my cluster via the GitOps configuration that I've showed you. So you can just simply have a look at the different deployments, but also the pods that it has. So you will see that I have the namespace team A, team B that will target specific application teams that will then change their application and push it to the environment. So that's basically it. To have the Arc-enabled Kubernetes. The other thing I wanted to show you, and that's also available in the Arc box, is that you can have your SQL managed instance on your Kubernetes cluster. So I have a different Kubernetes cluster, and on top of that, I've enabled or created the SQL managed instance, but the Arc-enabled data services. So here you will see you can just connect to it as you will with your on-prem environment. So I'm using Azure Data Studio just to connect to my SQL managed instance. If I run this simple command, you will see, oh, my connection is lost, but you will see that I am running still the same version as you have on your so you always have the latest version here. And like Wim has also, I think has not showed that, but you have the.
I can quickly show it if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just a simple database that Microsoft provided. So I've restored that to this one, and you will see that you have the different tables in place. One nice thing, if you're using Azure Arc enabled data services, is that you can have the Grafana, but also the Kibana interface. So that will monitor your SQL managed instance. And in that way, you can see all the nice things like transactions and the requests and so on. So very nice things here.
So, Jonah, do we still have a time for a few slides related to pricing? Because that's maybe also quite important for some people.
Yeah,
Do we still
can
have
do
some
that.
time? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we can extend a bit if it's okay with the audience. But we have a question related to the session of Karel. Let's see, where Asher's asked where can I get the guide to set up the Arc box for demo?
I think you've shared the link. I don't know.
Yeah, this one. I shared it. This one, that one.
And every step is quite explained. So if you want to demo out Azure Arc enabled servers, everything is written down. It's really a step-by-step approach. So you can deploy it, and then you even don't need a server like me in your garage. You can just do it from inside the Arc box in your Azure environment, for example. But it's just go to that specific website, and then everything is explained step by step how to use it, and you can choose your own scenario, which one you want to use. So
it's a very simple. So if you want to deploy the Arc box, there everything is inside. So what Wim showed you is inside it, the SQL Server, but also the Kubernetes and the Arc enabled data service. So it's just a template that has a lot of different scripts behind and different templates. So you deploy the template in your Azure environment, but make sure you follow the requirements. But you need a couple of CPUs there, so you need to enhance the CPU quota first before you do the deployment. Otherwise, it will fail. And once you've deployed that, you can simply run the VM to connect to. And you can then, if your demo has finished, you just shut down VMs, so it doesn't cost you any money. So that's very nice.
Okay, thank you. That was great. Yes, yeah. Let's. I think it's okay I hope it's okay for the audience. We go a bit over time, so let's go ahead and show the pricing.
Yeah.
Let me see.
We already took questions, so.
So my screen is sharing my slide deck. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Yeah. So before starting the Q&A and before closing off. One important thing we also need to look into is the pricing, because it's also a quite important aspect. And like we said in the beginning, at the end of the month, someone still needs to pay the Azure bill. So it's quite important to know what gets charged when you start using Arc. And first of all, when you start using Azure Arc enabled servers. So let me see if I can click. Yeah, there it is. So, this will be all Azure management servers that you can see listed at your right side of the slide, which is attached to a service will be charged. And quite simply, the pricing model for these servers will be the same as they are today for any of your Azure VMs. For example, Azure Monitor for Arc-enabled VMs will be priced the same way as it would be for your Azure VMs. Just keep in mind that the only acceptations are Azure Policy guest configurations and the Azure automation services, such as update management, desired state configuration, that change tracking I showed you, and the inventory, which are all free for your Azure VMs, but charged at around €5. Sweden is euros, if I'm correct, per server per month for any of your Azure Arc enabled VMs. So you could just use one of these services or features, or use them all together. The price will remain the same, so around €5 per server per month. It's just quite a little bit different for when you start using Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes. That price is based on the number of vCPUs per hour in the cluster and is also charged at a monthly base. Good to know is that the first 6 vCPUs are free, and then each vCPU costs around 1.6 euros per month, I think it was, Karel, if I do my calculation quite okay, still. And for our Azure Arc enabled data services, which allow you, like I'll show you, run Azure SQL managed instances or Azure SQL Postgres databases on premises or in a multi-cloud environment. The price is around, I think it's 130 euros for when you use pay as you go. But good to know is that you can also use the Azure Hybrid Use benefit if you have software assurance and you're using those things. And you can even use reservation for this, so you can reserve it for 1 year or for 3 years, which will at the end really lower your price. So pricing is quite different depending on which Azure Arc enabled resource you start using. But it's not that expensive, and it's an easy way to manage your complete hybrid environment from a single pane of glass. And maybe a last thing we also want to mention, Karel, and maybe good to know is, of course, during Ignite and before, there were a lot of announcements related to Arc. Like, for example, Azure Arc enabled VMsphere, which is a new capability in Azure Arc, and you can use it whenever you're running a VMware vSphere environment, either on premises or maybe some people are already using the Azure VMware solution. It also works for that one. And a thing it does, it will allow you to use, in a way, self-service access to your vSphere resources through Azure Arc, which in a way will enable you to deploy VMs on vSphere using ARM templates. So that's a quite a really nice announcement in my opinion. So you deploy your EAS VMs through ARM templates. You can use the same ARM templates or BICIMs these days to deploy those VMs from on top in Azure to your vSphere environment on-prem. And also direct corrected mode for Azure Arc enabled databases is with JI. And the last one is also an interesting one. It's a specific program, a cloud journey with the Azure, the AMP program. It will help you. It helps customers to deploy and manage. If they're not familiar with how to start with Arc, they can't find assistance from there, from other companies or from a service provider, for example. And during Ignite, it was announced that also Arc-enabled scenarios, or Arc is now a supported scenario in this program. So you can, through that program, connect to parties that can help you with deploying Arc into your environment. And with that, Karel, I think we can end up. Yeah. Or do you want to go through the key takeaways, or do we skip those?
A good question again.
We have a question. Yes.
Yeah, if we have experience where Arc is being used the most, so what we see is that it's used the most in a hybrid scenario. So not yet the multi-cloud environment, but mostly in the on-prem VMs, for example, that gets onboarded in Azure Arc, mostly for disaster recovery scenarios, backup and so, but also for security. So in that way, they can deploy the security agents from Azure Defender through their Azure Arc enabled servers. So that's a big benefit most of the companies are using today.
And I have a few customers who are running SQL Server on premises VMs, and they start onboarding those into Azure Arc, and then they have that SQL assessment that can really give them best practices and settings they need to. They're not that familiar with SQL. They don't have their own DBAs, for example, and that can really help them to uplift the security and then best practice-wise their SQL Server running on-prem. That's also some customers are already using that one. Yes. I helped them with the deployment, but it's already being used in production environments.
Yes, Gabriel said thank you for the answer.
No worries. So I think when we just have one little slide about the key takeaways, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah.
So the key takeaways here is that so the first one is that you have so the unified operations and also the management are very important here. And the second one, you have that built cloud native apps that you can do around your on-prem data center, but also through your multi-cloud environment. You can run your Azure services anywhere. So that's a big benefit. And what we see is that you can modernize not only your data, your applications, but also your data centers. And with that, Wim, I think we've already had some questions and answers and answered that. So I think we just are up with a big thank you to the Swedish Azure User Group Sweden and the good attendees that have asked a lot of questions here.
Yes, thank you so much,
thank you.
Karel and Wim, for joining us today. Do you have any upcoming events, by the way, that you want to announce or share to the audience?
Next Thursday we have our monthly. We do it during COVID. We do monthly events. So we have our MC2MC November evening, and I think one of the sessions will be related to containers in Kubernetes. I think it was Richard Rupert and Wesley, and then we also have some other Azure topic, and we have some speakers related to Microsoft 365. So through security, how you can secure your Azure environment with all those identities and stuff like that. So that would be an interesting evening also. And then we're also a part, I think you are also, Jona, from the Festive Tech calendar, I think, from Gregor and Richard.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're also posting a video related to how you can use, I think we did something around Azure Arc in combination with Windows Admin Center.
Yeah, Windows Admin Center, correct.
Yes. Yeah. I will be also on part of it. Yes. Have you submitted your deadlines?
We hope. It's the 26th, I think it wasn't. So probably we need to create a video next week, I think, or otherwise Gregor will not be that happy.
Me too. I have to meet the deadline. And we have a thank you before we end. We want to thank you, everyone, Ashish, everyone that joined us. Great presentation from Gabriel, a lot of great feedback, and I myself learned a lot today, and definitely gonna follow the sessions that you have. And without further ado, I want to thank you, everyone, and thank you, Wim and Karel. And
thank you for hosting.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, and hope to see you next time. And have a great weekend, everyone.
For you too. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.